I stood there on the front porch, trembling in the cold night air, my floral suitcase beside me. The porch light flickered as I reached for the doorknob. But it didn't turn. It was locked. I knocked. Then I rang the bell. Then I knocked again, harder this time. No answer. That's when I noticed the folded paper, taped crookedly to the glass window of my front door. I peeled it off with shaking fingers and squinted under the dim light. The handwriting was unmistakable. My son's. Mom, you've had your time here. This isn't your home anymore. I dropped the note. I think my breath got caught somewhere in my chest and forgot how to move. My own son. He locked me out of my own house. And that was just the beginning. My name is Margaret Adley. I'm 86 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I've got white blonde hair that's thinned out over the years, but I keep it curled the way my late husband, Harold, liked it. I lived a quiet life after Harold passed. My days were slow, filled with crossword puzzles, warm oatmeal, and the occasional phone call from my only son, Tommy. He used to call me Mama Bear. Now he doesn't call me at all. This story doesn't start with the note on the door. It starts a few months before that, when Tommy surprised me with something that made my heart swell with hope. "Mom, you deserve a vacation," he had said one morning over eggs. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone. Let us take care of you for once." He and his wife, Brittany, had been staying with me for almost a year. They moved in after Tommy lost his job and said they needed a place to regroup. I didn't mind. It was nice to have company, least at first. He showed me a pamphlet for a senior cruise to the Caribbean. 10 days, all expenses paid. "You'll love it. You always wanted to see the ocean," he said. I was hesitant, of course. I hadn't traveled in years, and my knees didn't like the idea of dancing or sightseeing. But Tommy insisted. He even helped me pack. "Don't worry about a thing, Mom. We'll take care of everything here," he promised as he loaded my bags into the Uber. I hugged him goodbye on the driveway, not knowing it would be the last time I'd see him smile at me. The cruise itself was like something from a dream. I stood on the deck watching the water stretch forever. I danced one slow waltz with a widower from Texas named Henry. I even tried shrimp cocktail for the first time. But something nagged at the back of my mind. Tommy hadn't called once. I tried his number, voicemail. Emailed, no reply. I called the house. Brittany answered once and hung up before I could say hello. Still, I told myself they were just busy. Young people live differently. When the ship docked and I finally stepped onto land again, I was ready to go home. I missed the smell of my lilac bushes. I missed my cat, Daisy. I called Tommy from the airport. "Hey, back, sweetie. Can you come pick me up?" Then a cold voice. "We're not available. You'll have to figure it out, Mom." I took a taxi home. I stared out the window, watching my neighborhood roll past like a memory I was trying to hold on to. When we turned onto my street, I noticed something strange. My garden gnome was gone. The welcome mat I crocheted myself, replaced with one that said, "Live, laugh, love." There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. Sleek, silver, not at all the kind Tommy used to drive. I paid the driver and dragged my little suitcase up the porch steps, heart pounding. I reached for the doorknob. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Then I saw it. A note. "Mom, you've had your time here. This isn't your home anymore." No explanation. No number to call. No key. Just those words. I stood there, 86 years old, just returned from vacation, left with nowhere to go. But what I didn't know then was that this betrayal was just the beginning. 'Cause what I found out next turned everything upside down. I didn't cry. Not right away. I stood there, silent, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it was the only thing left tying me to this life. My porch light buzzed overhead. I could see the familiar outline of my living room lamp glowing softly through the window. My curtains were open. My curtains, the ones I'd sewn by hand back in 1987. And yet, I was no longer welcome behind them. I bent down slowly to pick up the note. I read it again, as if maybe the words would change. Mom, you've had your time here. This isn't your home anymore. It didn't say, love, Tommy. It didn't say, we'll talk soon. It was final, cold, like a door slammed shut forever. I pulled my phone from my handbag and tried his number again. Straight to voicemail. Tommy, I said, trying to steady my voice. I'm outside. I don't understand. Please call me back. Please, baby. Still nothing. I didn't know where to go. It was almost 10 p.m. and the street was quiet. The neighbors I used to chat with had all moved away or passed on. The new folks didn't even wave. I sat down on the porch steps, the cold from the concrete creeping up through my bones. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and pulled my suitcase close like a shield. Then the porch light turned off. They had turned it off. Inside I heard movement, laughter. A woman's voice, Brittany. And then I heard something else. Music. They were having a party. Car drove by slowly, then backed up. The window rolled down. Ma'am, are you all right? Came a voice from a young man in his early 30s, brown hair, glasses, and a kind face. I live here, I stammered. At least I used to. He looked confused. You okay to be out here alone? I didn't know how to answer that. I must have looked pitiful sitting there like a stray cat in the night. He got out of the car and helped me to my feet. I'm Aaron. I just moved in a few houses down. Do you want to come sit in my living room while you figure this out? Bless him. He nodded. He helped me into his car, careful and gentle like I was made of glass. His house was warm, filled with boxes and the smell of pizza. I sat on the couch while he made me tea. I can call the police if you want, he offered. No, I whispered. That's my son in there. I don't want to ruin his life. But deep down, something was beginning to crack. And I needed answers. That's my son in there. I don't want to ruin his life. But deep down, something was beginning to crack. And I needed answers. The next morning, Aaron offered to drive me to the county clerk's office. I need to see the original deed, I told the lady behind the counter. And the transfer documents. She hesitated but looked it up. Yes, ma'am. The property was transferred on May 3rd. Signed by Margaret Adley and notarized by Brittany Lawson. Can I get a copy? I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. She handed me a printed copy of the documents. My signature stared back at me, bold and unfamiliar. Aaron leaned over and pointed. Look. The notary ID she used doesn't match any active notary in the state. I raised my eyes. So, it's fake. It looks like it, he nodded. You may have a legal case. But even hearing that, all I could feel was the ache of betrayal. My own son. My only child. I thought about all the things I did for Tommy growing up. How I worked 3 jobs to afford his college. How I went without dentures for a year just so he could make rent during that awful internship. I even sold Harold's vintage record collection to help him launch that useless podcast he never finished. I gave him everything. And now, he gave me nothing. Not even a couch to sleep on. I walked back to my house that evening. Not with a key, but with the documents in hand and fire in my chest. I rang the doorbell and stood straight when the door finally creaked open. Brittany appeared, wearing one of my old cardigans. Yes, she asked, her smile fake as plastic. I want to talk to my son, I said, holding the papers up. He's not here, she said flatly. And I don't think you should be either. I know what you two did, I said, my voice trembling. You forged my signature. You notarized it yourself. That's fraud. Brittany's eyes didn't even flinch. You signed it, Margaret. Maybe you forgot. Happens at your age. That word, your age, stabbed me. She was gaslighting me. I took a deep breath. I'm giving you 48 hours to return the deed, or I go to the police. Then I turned and walked away before she could see my tears. Back at Aaron's place, something clicked in my mind. Wait, I whispered. I had a nanny cam. Aaron looked confused. A what? In my sewing room. after someone stole money from my purse last Christmas. I never told them. He raised his eyebrows. And you think it was recording? If it still had batteries, I said, then it might have caught the day they made me sign the papers. We rushed back to the house, not to go in, but to peek through the side window of the sewing room. The camera was still there, cleverly hidden in my old porcelain angel on the shelf. If I could get my hands on that footage. But the next morning, just as we were planning how to retrieve the camera without breaking the law, I received another message. This time, from Brittany's number. We're selling the house this weekend. Cash buyer. You have no right to interfere. I clutched the phone, my nails digging into my palm. They weren't just stealing the house. They were erasing me from it. But I had one thing they didn't know about yet. That camera. And once I got that footage, they'd regret ever thinking an old woman was easy to silence. But I had one thing they didn't know about yet. That camera. And once I got that footage, they'd regret ever thinking an old woman was easy to silence. Jeanette helped us organize a sting. She thinks she's above the law, she said. So we let her incriminate herself. We contacted Detective Marsh and gave her the photo. She arranged a search warrant, but only if we could pinpoint Brittany's location. She's not staying with Tommy anymore, I told them. He's sleeping on a friend's couch, and he won't return my calls. She might have gone back to her sister's, Aaron said, typing quickly. I remember her mentioning someone named Tina. Within minutes, we found a Facebook post. Brittany, holding a glass of wine, captioned, "Back in my old stomping grounds with my little fur queen. Paw prints." The location tag. Clear Lake, Iowa. Gotcha. 3 days later I got the call. "Mrs. Adley," Detective Marsh said, "we've recovered your cat." I nearly dropped the phone. She was found in an apartment leased under Tina Lawson. Brittany answered the door. Daisy was in a crate by the fireplace. Alive, healthy but scared. You can pick her up today. I drove up with Aaron, my palms sweating the whole ride. When I walked into that shelter and saw Daisy, she meowed once, soft and hoarse. And when I opened the crate, she crawled straight into my arms, her little body vibrating with purrs. "I've got you, baby," I whispered. "I'm never letting you go again." But as I settled Daisy back home, something inside me ached. I looked around at the house. My house. It still didn't feel like mine. The walls echoed with their voices. The kitchen smelled like their meals. The scars on the floor, those were theirs too. Even the bedroom felt foreign. I sat on the edge of the bed that night and whispered to Harold's photo, "Did I make this house too easy to take?" Then I turned to Daisy and said aloud, "Maybe it's time to stop fighting to keep the past. Maybe it's time to start building something new." What came next? I wasn't prepared for. Jeanette advised we take the story to the press. "Elder fraud is wildly underreported," she said. "If your son and his wife can do this, how many others are getting away with it?" I agreed quietly, cautiously. The Cedar Rapids Chronicle ran the headline. "Blonde grandma outsmarts son who stole her house." Then the TV stations came calling. I wore my best blue dress and my church pearls and told my story on Good Morning Iowa. I watched the views tick past 200,000 on YouTube. One comment stood out. "She's stronger than most people I know. I hope she gets everything back, including peace." That comment felt like a hug. A week later, Tommy and Brittany were served formal criminal charges: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy. Brittany's smug smile vanished from court. Tommy looked pale and sweaty in a suit 2 sizes too big. When the judge asked if I had a victim impact statement, I stood. I held the microphone tight and looked my son in the eye. "You didn't just steal my house. You tried to erase me. But I'm still standing. And now you are the one outside the door." 3 weeks passed. Daisy was finally eating regularly again. I was sleeping through the night. I even joined a seniors book club. Life was quieter. But then one morning I found a new envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside. Letter. Handwritten. "Dear Mom, I know I don't deserve to call you that anymore. I'm in county jail. Brittany left me. Have no one. I was wrong. I was scared. I thought taking everything from you would fix my own failure. Sorry. If you never forgive me, I understand. But if you ever want to see me again, I'll be here. Tommy. I stood there on the porch, letter in hand. I didn't know if it was guilt or manipulation. But one thing was certain. He finally saw the door from the outside. Now I had to decide. Would I ever open it? I folded the letter carefully, then slid it under the ceramic fruit bowl on my kitchen counter. I wasn't ready to throw it away, but I wasn't ready to reply either. The next few days passed like wind through brittle leaves. Kept busy. Scrubbed the baseboards. Reorganized the spice rack. I even called Jeanette to ask about starting an online blog for Grace. But every quiet moment, my eyes flicked back to that bowl. It's a strange thing when your own child becomes a question mark. Then came the knock. It was 6:42 a.m. I had just poured coffee when I heard it. Soft, hesitant. Opened the door. There he was. Me. Gray hoodie. Worn jeans. A small duffel bag by his feet. Head down. Shoulders slumped. The morning sun caught the tears already trailing his cheeks. I don't expect anything, he said. Not a bed. Not food. Not forgiveness. I didn't speak. I just wanted you to know. I'm not the same man who locked you out. Swear, Mum. I'm not. He looked up at me then. The eyes were the same ones I saw when he got stung by a bee at age 5. When he begged me not to throw away his broken toy truck. When he asked me if he'd ever be enough for his dad. I took a deep breath. You can come in, I said softly. But you're sleeping on the pullout. And you cleaned the litter box. His chuckle cracked. Deal. That first night was quiet. No long talks. No therapy sessions. No forgiveness ceremony over dinner. Just two people eating spaghetti at the same table with the weight of 1,000 mistakes hanging in the air. Daisy sat between us on the floor like a tiny referee. Tommy helped clean the dishes. He folded his sheets neatly. He didn't pry or beg. He simply existed. Present, quiet, humble. 2 days later, I told him he'd be helping at the Grace Center. If you're staying here, you give back, I said. He nodded. Gladly. Word got out. Oh, she took him back, the town buzzed. Some said I was kind. Others said I was naive. A woman at church stopped me and whispered, You're making a mistake. I smiled and said, Probably. But it's mine to make. The Margaret Adley Center for Dignity and Defense opened with 200 women in attendance. Tommy swept floors, handed out name tags, and poured tea for women who had been ignored their entire lives. He didn't talk much, but he listened. And they began to talk to him. One widow told him about her daughter who took her Medicare checks. Another woman cried in his arms, saying her son hadn't called her in 3 years. Every night he'd come home tired. And quieter. One night he sat on the porch swing. I miss her, he said. I turned to him. Who? Brittany. Or, the version of her I thought was real. You miss what you believed, I said. That's not wrong. It's human. Then he admitted something that hurt more than any letter or lie. She said you were weak, Mom. That you were too soft to fight back. That's why I thought we could take everything. He looked down, ashamed. I've never been so wrong. I said nothing. Some truths are best left echoing. Weeks passed. We built routines. He planted tomatoes. I taught him to knit. He helped me lead a Grace session called What They Don't Tell You About Boundaries. One day a young woman knocked. Her name was Rachel. She was 33, single, and had just escaped a manipulative marriage. She asked to volunteer at the center. Tommy showed her around. And one evening, I saw them laughing softly near the garden. Something warm flickered in my chest. Not hope. Not yet. But something close to it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to Tommy. Not to Harold. Me. Dear Margaret. You did it. You survived what no mother should ever endure. You found your strength and you used it. You didn't close the door forever. You opened it carefully, and you let light back in. You forgave not because they earned it, but because you deserved peace. I folded the letter and tucked it in my Bible. And then I went to bed with Daisy purring at my side, the windows open and the door locked, not to keep anyone out, but because I finally felt safe inside. The garden began to thrive. Tommy turned out to be good with soil, who would have thought? He said it calmed his mind. He planted basil, tomatoes, bell peppers, and even repurposed old tin cans to grow mint. One day he handed me a bowl of homemade soup and said, "Everything in this came from out back." I tasted it slowly. It was a little too salty. "Next time," I smiled, "let's ease up on the sodium." He laughed. "Yes, ma'am." But the moments that stuck with me weren't the ones when we talked. They were the ones when we didn't need to. He'd hand me the newspaper without a word. I'd leave his laundry folded on the stair rail. We lived like distant planets, spinning in the same system, finally learning not to crash. Rachel kept coming around, not just to volunteer but to talk. Sometimes she'd bring tea and banana bread. Other times she'd walk with Daisy in the yard and tell Tommy about her life. She had grown up in foster care. Never knew her real mother. She said, "Being here feels like, I don't know, a soft place." I'd watch the two of them from the window, her laughing, him loosening. And I thought, maybe healing doesn't always come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes in broken people showing each other kindness for the first time. But not all moments were easy. One morning I woke up and Tommy was gone. No note, no message. The coffee pot was empty. The bed unslept in. His shoes were gone. My heart froze. I sat in my chair, trying not to let my mind run. But it did. Had he left? Relapsed into old ways? Gone back to Brittany? Then the door opened, and in walked Tommy, carrying a new pair of shoes for me. "I noticed your soles were splitting," he said, setting the box down. "And, well, I used some of the money I've saved from working with Jeanette's brother to get you these." He set them in front of me. Soft orthopedic, my size. I wanted to cry. "Don't vanish like that again," I said firmly. He nodded. "I won't." That night we had soup again. Less salty. Then we sat on the porch under the stars. "I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you," he said. "You won't," I replied. "Because it was never about repayment." He looked confused. "It was about rebuilding trust. And trust isn't a transaction. It's a daily choice." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep choosing." In early autumn, the mayor came to one of our grace meetings. He watched the women speak, some crying, some raging, all finding pieces of themselves that had gone silent for decades. At the end he stood and said, "What you've built here, this is what real leadership looks like." We got a small grant that month. Enough to renovate the town's abandoned library into our new home base. On opening day, the line wrapped around the block. A woman in a wheelchair grabbed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." That night, Tommy grilled chicken in the backyard. Rachel brought over a fruit salad. And Daisy kept trying to steal a piece of sausage off the table. I looked around, at the lights, the laughter, the worn table set with love, and realized something. This wasn't the life I had planned. But it was a life I had earned. Every scraped knee, every betrayal, every knock at the door, brought me here. And when Tommy stood up and said, "Can I say something?" everyone grew quiet. He looked at me, then at Rachel, then at the faces gathered around. I used to think strength meant control, having power, owning things. But now, I think it means standing up after you've fallen, and choosing to love, even after you've been unloved. He paused. "I wouldn't be here if not for my mom. She didn't just open her door. She opened her heart. And that changed everything." I felt tears rise, but I didn't let them fall. I simply reached over and took his hand. No speeches. Just a mother and a son, sitting under string lights, surrounded by second chances. 2 weeks later, Rachel stopped by early, before anyone else was awake. She brought cinnamon rolls. The real kind, not the ones from a tube. Morning, she smiled, holding them up like a peace offering. Someone's trying to bribe her way into the good china, I teased. But there was something different in her eyes that day. Nervousness, tenderness. She poured us both tea, and we sat in the quiet kitchen light. Then she said it. Tommy asked me if I'd like to go with him to visit his dad's grave. I paused, stirring my tea slowly. He hasn't been in years, I said. Not since before Brittany. I know, she replied. He said he's ready now. But he didn't want to go alone. I smiled and nodded. You're good for him. She looked down. I'm not sure I'm good for anyone. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You're exactly the kind of person who ends up saving others without realizing it. That Sunday they went. I didn't ask how it went. I didn't have to. When they came back, Tommy hugged me. Long. The kind that said more than words ever could. From that day on, Rachel became a regular part of our lives. She joined Grace not just as a volunteer, but as a speaker. She shared her story of abandonment, resilience, and rebuilding. The women adored her. So did Daisy. One afternoon, I found Tommy painting the porch railings with a fresh coat of white. You've been busy, I said. He shrugged. Just trying to make things right. Then he turned nervous. Would you be okay if I, maybe invited Rachel to stay for a while? I raised an eyebrow. In the guest room, he added quickly. I let him squirm for a moment before finally nodding. As long as she helps clean the gutters. He grinned. Deal. Time passed quietly. Autumn turned to winter. The center grew busier. More women. More stories. More healing. We held workshops on wills, power of attorney, digital scams. We partnered with a local law firm to offer pro bono advice. One night, after a long day at the center, I sat by the fireplace with Daisy curled in my lap. Tommy came in with 2 mugs of cocoa. I've been thinking, he said, about going back to school. Maybe getting certified to be a counselor. Like, for elder support. I looked at him. Not the boy I raised. Not the man who failed me. But someone becoming. That's a good thought, I said. You'd be good at it. You know what it's like to fall. He nodded. And now I know what it's like to be caught. We clinked our mugs together. To starting over, he said. No, I corrected gently. To growing up. That winter, the town put up a plaque outside the Grace Center. It read, in honor of those who were silenced. And the one woman who refused to stay silent. And beneath it, etched in gold, Margaret Adley. I stood there in the snow, mittens soaked, heart warm. I wasn't just someone's mother anymore. I wasn't just the woman who got locked out. I was the woman who let herself back in, and left the door open for others. A few days after the plaque was unveiled, I received a letter in the mail. This time, not from a stranger, a lawyer, or a scam artist. It was from a girl named Lila, 17 years old. The envelope was addressed in the wobbly cursive of someone who still dotted her I's with circles. Dear Mrs. Adley, my grandmother told me what you did. She was in one of your classes at Grace. She said you helped her get her house back. I didn't understand why she cried so much until I heard what happened. My mom always told us Grandma was forgetful, difficult. But she wasn't. She was scared. I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. Can I come meet you? I want to learn from someone strong like you. Cried. Not the loud kind. Just quiet tears that warmed my cheeks as the wind pressed against the window. I'd spent so long thinking I'd been used up. Now I was being looked up to. We arranged a meeting. Lila came with her grandmother, a tall woman with strong eyes and a walker wrapped in floral tape. Lila sat across from me at my kitchen table, eyes wide, voice soft. I want to help other girls know their worth early, she said, before someone tries to take it from them. I poured her tea. Then you're already doing better than most. That spring, we launched the Grace Junior Initiative, a mentoring program pairing older women with teenage girls in foster care, shelters, and group homes. We called it From Roots to Wings. Tommy helped organize the logistics. Rachel handled the calendar and volunteer training. I oversaw each match personally. And Daisy, ever the queen, sat in a little basket near the sign-in desk, greeting every visitor with a blink of approval. One afternoon, as I watched a 14-year-old girl braid a 70-year-old woman's hair during a story-sharing circle, I felt something bloom in my chest that I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not the quiet kind that hides in empty rooms. The vibrant kind that lives in the laughter of others. Later that night, Tommy found me folding brochures. He hesitated in the doorway. "I've been working on something," he said. "I wasn't sure when to tell you." He pulled a thin blue folder from under his arm and handed it to me. The title read, "Nonprofit Incorporation Proposal. The Adley Foundation." My eyes flicked up. "It's not just for Grace," he said. "It's for housing support, legal defense, emergency relocation. I want to build something that keeps growing, even when you're ready to rest." Smiled. "Are you asking me to step down?" He chuckled. "No, just to sit beside me. Not in front, not behind." I opened the folder. Everything was there. Budgets, mission, grant partners, even quotes from women we'd helped. "You did all this?" "Yes." He nodded. "With Rachel's help." And just like that, I realized he wasn't rebuilding my legacy. He was building his own. Later that month, Tommy proposed to Rachel. He did it under the maple tree we planted when he was 7. She cried. He cried. Daisy meowed right in the middle of it. They asked me to officiate. I wore my lavender suit. Read from Corinthians. And when I looked Tommy in the eye and said, "Do you promise to love, honor, and never let her sign anything without reading it first?" The whole backyard roared with laughter. That evening, when the music faded and the cake was gone, I stood alone in the garden with Harold's photo in my hand. "They're gonna be okay," I whispered. "We're gonna be okay." Then I turned to go inside, the porch light warm behind me, the door wide open. No locks, no secrets, just home. The next morning, I woke up to birdsong and a stiff back. I shuffled to the kitchen, still wearing my slippers, and saw the stack of wedding plates piled beside the sink. Rachel had offered to wash them. Tommy said he'd load the dishwasher. But I knew better. Some things never change. As I rolled up my sleeves, I found a sticky note on the fridge in Tommy's messy scrawl. "Don't you dare touch these dishes. Seriously. Go sit down. We love you." Beside it was a second note, Rachel's writing neater. "P.S. There's leftover cake in the fridge. You earned 2 slices." I laughed. It was a little thing. But I took the cake out, put it on a real plate, and sat at the table by the window. Daisy jumped up beside me and stared at it with her usual royal entitlement. I broke off a bite and gave it to her. I figured she earned something too. That afternoon, we held the first meeting of the Adley Foundation Board. Tommy stood at the head of the community center's main hall, fumbling with his tie, grinning like a schoolboy giving a book report. Rachel sat beside him, clipboard in hand, giving him silent cues. She was always the organized one. I sat quietly in the front row with Delilah. Remember her? The woman who nearly lost her parents' home. Now she was head of outreach. The foundation's goals were simple. Legal aid for the elderly. Emergency shelter for women forced out of their homes. Teen mentorship programs. And eventually a crisis line, run by volunteers trained by survivors. As Tommy read the mission aloud, I looked around the room. So many faces I'd met through heartbreak. So many hands that once trembled, now holding pens, plans, and each other. And at the very end of the row, Layla, the teenager who'd written me that letter about her grandmother months ago. She was there with her hair tied in a high ponytail, taking notes for the youth council. When she caught me looking, she gave me a thumbs up. I blinked away a tear. After the meeting, Tommy walked over and asked, "So, how'd I do?" Smirk. "You only said, 14 times. Much better than your 5th grade play." He grinned. Harold would have fallen asleep halfway through. "No," I said. He'd have cried the whole time and pretended not to. We walked out of the building together. The late spring sun hit the sidewalk in golden streaks. Everything felt new. Not perfect but growing. Tommy stopped before we reached the car. "I want to do something else," he said. "Soon." "What's that?" "I want to ask Lila's grandmother if she'll let me film her story. You said we need to document this work. I want others to hear it. Not just in articles, but face to face." I nodded slowly. "That's a good idea. You think she'd say yes?" "She might," I said. "If the person asking really listens." He grinned. "I learned from the best." That night, after everyone went home and the house was quiet, I stepped onto the porch and looked out at the yard. The garden beds were full. The trees were thick with promise. Somewhere inside, Tommy and Rachel were laughing about something. Probably the dishes. I looked up at the stars. I didn't ask them for anything. I just whispered, "Thank you." For the pain. For the fight. For the strength I didn't know I had. And most of all, for letting me live long enough to watch the healing begin. I sat quietly in the front row with Delilah. Remember her? The woman who nearly lost her parents' home. Now she was head of outreach. The foundation's goals were simple. Legal aid for the elderly. Emergency shelter for women forced out of their homes. Teen mentorship programs. And eventually a crisis line, run by volunteers trained by survivors. As Tommy read the mission aloud, I looked around the room. So many faces I'd met through heartbreak. So many hands that once trembled, now holding pens, plans, and each other. And at the very end of the row, Layla, the teenager who'd written me that letter about her grandmother months ago. She was there with her hair tied in a high ponytail, taking notes for the youth council. When she caught me looking, she gave me a thumbs up. I blinked away a tear. After the meeting, Tommy walked over and asked, "So, how'd I do?" Smirk. "You only said, 14 times. Much better than your 5th grade play." He grinned. Harold would have fallen asleep halfway through. "No," I said. He'd have cried the whole time and pretended not to. We walked out of the building together. The late spring sun hit the sidewalk in golden streaks. Everything felt new. Not perfect but growing. Tommy stopped before we reached the car. "I want to do something else," he said. "Soon." "What's that?" "I want to ask Lila's grandmother if she'll let me film her story. You said we need to document this work. I want others to hear it. Not just in articles, but face to face." I nodded slowly. "That's a good idea. You think she'd say yes?" "She might," I said. "If the person asking really listens." He grinned. "I learned from the best." That night, after everyone went home and the house was quiet, I stepped onto the porch and looked out at the yard. The garden beds were full. The trees were thick with promise. Somewhere inside, Tommy and Rachel were laughing about something. Probably the dishes. I looked up at the stars. I didn't ask them for anything. I just whispered, "Thank you." For the pain. For the fight. For the strength I didn't know I had. And most of all, for letting me live long enough to watch the healing begin. Life lesson from the story. Quiet strength is the most powerful kind, because it doesn't seek revenge, it rebuilds. And in the face of betrayal, reclaiming your dignity with grace, truth, and boundaries is the most lasting form of justice. Margaret's story teaches us that family can hurt you deeply, but healing is possible without erasing yourself. She didn't allow her son's betrayal to define her. Instead, she used her pain to build something that helped others. It's never too late to find your voice and stand up for yourself. Margaret was 86 when she reclaimed her home, her power, and her purpose. Age was never a limitation, it was her advantage. Forgiveness is a choice, not a debt. She forgave Tommy not because he earned it, but because she deserved peace. Legacy isn't just what we leave behind, it's what we teach others to carry forward. Through Grace and the Adley Foundation, Margaret turned her personal pain into a public beacon. Ultimately, the story reminds us that when someone tries to erase you from your own life, You don't disappear. You rebuild. And you leave the door open for those who are willing to return. Differently.